Friday, April 10th, 2026, Callahan, Florida. It's day 2 of my 5-day excursion to South Georgia and North Florida. I'm awake with the morning parade of trains at 5 a.m. Barely 10 minutes go by when the first one appears.
796 clear South Callahan, track 2, 885 north. Clear Callahan, track 2, 885.
That dark shadow in the night is the elusive Fernandina rocket, CSX L796, a shuttle between Rice Yard in Waycross, Georgia, and Bush Yard in Jacksonville, Florida. 796 traverses the Kingsland subdivision at Grand Junction near Moncrief and travels via the Trout River Bridge to Bush Yard, named after the adjacent Anheuser-Busch Brewery. The train handles traffic for North Jacks, Long Island, Fernandina Beach, and Kingsland, interchanging with the First Coast Railroad and St. Mary's Railroad at Yulee. The lone ES44AC leader is clear for track speed thanks to both the light consist and use of portable ditch lights on the long hood. As 796 cleared, a second northbound came into view. CSX M442 is another manifest for Waycross, this time from Yeoman Yard in Tampa, Florida. 442 is coming off the Callahan subdivision from Baldwin and onto the A-Line Nahunta subdivision to Folkestone, Waycross, Jessup, and Savannah. You can't quite tell, but you can certainly hear that a flared SD-70 Mac is leading the train. Track speed on the connection here is 25 miles per hour. Some rail cars do slightly better than others on the tight curve. After the Eardrum Massacre, I started north and landed at Hilliard. Hilliard is at milepost A614 on the Nahunta sub with an excellent view of the tracks. I was anticipating a convoy of 3 southbound trains through here soon. The first one didn't take long, quickly showing itself amidst the daybreak. It's Amtrak PO53, the southbound auto train from Lorton, Virginia to Sanford, Florida. 2 of Amtrak's new Siemens ALC-42 Charger locomotives lead the way, an increasingly common sight nowadays and a stark difference from the usual duo of older General Electric P40 DCs. In a baffling run of bad luck, I did not see a single P40 while I was down here, not even trailing. On the bright side though, this was the exact train consist I rode in on. It was cool seeing my train set at speed from the wayside and also riding on it round trip. Apparently, the other 2 southbounds are very close by, as both signals at South Hilliard are lit up by the dispatcher.
Detector, milepost 610.7. Track 1. No defects. No defects. Total axle 4. 8 of transmission.
At 7:49 a.m., down comes the red-hot IO31, a morning staple from North Bergen, New Jersey with time-sensitive UPS and mail for Duval Yard in Jacksonville, as well as a huge block of Tropicana orange juice reefers for the plant at Bradenton. Aside from the Tropicana blocks, IO31 hauls traffic for 4 different destinations throughout Florida. Those include this block of domestic containers for the I-177 to Winter Haven, some UPS and mail for IO45 to Tampa, a cut of cars for the Florida East Coast Railway at Bowden Yard, and some more mail for the intermodal ramp at Duval. Altogether, IO31 is about 12,000 feet in length, which is nothing out of the ordinary for this service. A high-priority train, dispatchers know better than to mess with the O31.
Equipment defect detector. Milepost 610.7. Total axle 4. End of transmission.
Right on cue, our third southbound appears. It's Amtrak 41, the Floridian, quickly gaining on the IO31 in front of him. He'll race past it on track 2 around Densmore before entering his Jacksonville station stop. I press north, crossing the state border into Georgia. I arrive at Folkestone to good news. Both northbound signals are lit up for trains to pass.
Dispatcher, MA5210. Hey, Rob. I gotta get you on line 5A, line 10, Florida 14,
About 9 a.m., CSX M452 appears with freight out of Hialeah Yard in Miami for Waycross. He's actually running as M852 due to a maintenance curfew south of Tampa. 852 is coming up on track 1 and diverting onto the Jessup subdivision to Waycross. Note the SD40-3 dead in tow, likely heading for a 92-day inspection at the Waycross shops. M852 gets a limited approach signal at Folkestone turnout because he's only lined as far as Hague, where the double track singles up. There, he will wait for his counterpart, M453, to pass in the opposing before continuing north. Only 5 minutes pass until the next train. The flying northbound I-138 out of Moncrief Yard in Jax for Pinoca Yard in Charlotte, North Carolina. With both northbounds in the clear, M453 could enter the Nahunta subdivision. And a surprise! CSX 3194, the spirit of our law enforcement unit, was trailing in second. Back into Florida, I set up at the crossing north of the control point at Boulogne for Amtrak 97, the southbound Silver Meteor to Miami from New York City. 97 is typically the last train of the morning rush, beginning a multi-hour lull on the main line. But this didn't bother me because I know a spot where there's still an influx of trains happening. Contrary to popular belief, Florida is not entirely flat land, and this scene proves that point. The grade here gets as steep as 1.3% if I remember correctly.
98 clear downtown Hilliard. 96. Get your waving hand warmed up. Smile for your fans. I can hear them chanting already. Bruce, 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 Bruce.
The A-Line parade may be over, but that's no problem, as Norfolk Southern's GS and F Valdosta district is within reach. And with my luck, there was a train on it. Norfolk Southern 29F snuck up on me as I was setting up at Crawford, where the GS and F crosses the CSX Callahan subdivision on a double diamond. 29F is another hot intermodal train from Calumet Yard in Chicago for Bowdoin Yard in Jax on the FEC. It's an easy train to pick out from the bunch, as it has all those black FEC containers on it, along with huge blocks of UPS. Wow.
3046, clear across one track.
Coming north on the Callahan sub is CSX L729, the Rock Runner, from Winston, Florida to Junction City, Georgia. The train hauls empty rock hoppers from Central and South Florida for Junction City Mining and Martin Marietta up on the Fitzgerald subdivision. Several rail fans were gathering because an empty potash train was about to depart Baldwin and would soon pass right here. The train in question was B240, originating at Rockport Yard in Cleveland. I'm sorry, I forgot I'm not in Ohio. Originating at Rockport Yard in Tampa for the Canadian National at Chicago. A former City Rail locomotive and a CN Tier 4 lead the way. After a brief pause for lunch, I returned to the Callahan sub at Briceville for the afternoon parade. Several trains were lined up and ready to go. First out of the gate is IO36, hotshot intermodal from Duval Yard in Jacksonville for North Bergen, New Jersey. This is the Friday version of IO32, hauling UPS, piggybacks, and single stacks to Jersey. I then heard an I-137 coming south through Folkston, except this train doesn't use the Callahan sub. I made the call to dash over to Ratliff on the A-line, a good 10 minutes from my current location, but I made it just in time.
CSX Equipment Defect Detector. Milepost 628.5. Track 1. No defects. No defects. Total axle 234. End of transmission.
Just as quickly, I race back to Briceville for the IO-26, another hot intermodal from Duval Yard for Bedford Park, Illinois. This time, I'm greeted with a clear signal on Track 3 for a southbound. And yes, I did in fact say Track 3 even though there's only 2 tracks here. I'll explain why that is a little later.
IO-26 with CSX 867. Got it clear. Briceville, start 1.
As of the making of this series, CSX routes all of their afternoon trains out of Duval via Duval Connection, the SP Line, Baldwin Tower, and the Callahan Subdivision. This is to avoid both the congestion of busy Moncrief and Beaver Street Tower and Jacks, as well as the GS&F crossing at the north end of Duval Yard, as NS typically has several trains departing to the north around this time. All of CSX's trackage from Jacksonville to Waycross and Savannah are handled by the JE Dispatcher Desk here in town. One of the reasons I love to railfan this region is because you can literally set your watch to the trains here, as they typically maintain a high rate of timeliness. This is thanks in part to CSX putting some of their finest dispatchers on this territory. Approaching from the south is another M442 out of Tampa for Waycross. This is M442 of the 10th, today's train. The 442 we saw at Callahan this morning originated on the 9th. The green signal on Track 3 is for southbound M603, manifest from Waycross for Winston, Florida. A long, heavy train with only one engine up front and one DPU in the middle. This crew has a long night ahead of them. .603 is a daily train hauling manifest for customers in Lakeland and surrounding areas, as well as rock hoppers for Martin Marietta and Conrad Yelvington in Mulberry, and chemical tanks and empty phosphate hoppers for the Bone Valley. The Bone Valley is the central phosphate mining region in Florida, which at one point produced 75 to 80% of the United States' phosphate supply, kind of like how the Monongahela Valley is the coal capital of Pennsylvania. Phosphate is used primarily in commercial agricultural fertilizer. The back half of M603, at least 100 cars worth, was entirely empty phosphate hoppers returning to the Bone Valley, a promising sign that business is booming down there. The southbound number 3 signal at Bryceville comes up yet again for another train. Our next contestant is another manifest, a king-sized M457 out of Waycross for Taft Yard in Orlando, Florida. The train will drop several blocks of local customers off for Baldwin and pick up several strings of auto racks loaded with vehicles for Taft TDSI. I had the pleasure of meeting the Palmetto Sub Railfan on the right side of your screen there. I highly recommend you give him a follow on Instagram. The 457 is another train running a 1x1 power configuration. The mid-DPU is an old AC 4400 CW built in the early 2000s and still in its original coat of paint. By now, I heard an IO-45 getting ready to depart Duval for its nightly run to Tampa, so I decide to relocate to Baldwin Tower. This is the north end of CSX's Baldwin Yard here in Florida. If you look closely, these two tracks are Track 1 and Track 2 of the Wildwood subdivision from Tampa, Ocala, and Wildwood. If you follow them north under Interstate 10, you wind up at Baldwin Interlocking, and there's now 3 tracks coming out of the yard. The far right track is still Track 2, and that branches off into the Wildwood connection and eventually becomes Track 2 of the SP line to Jacksonville. Meanwhile, Track 1, the middle track, stays completely straight and crosses over the SP line and becomes Track 1 of the Callahan sub to Callahan. Now, the way CSX timetables their tracks, heading north, Track 2 is always on the right, and Track 1 is always on the left. But because Track 2 in this case branches off, that would leave Track 1 on the right, and that would go against CSX's standard timetable system, whatever you want to call it. So, what they did, because this yard lead comes out of Baldwin and crosses over and becomes the main line, the Callahan subdivision, they made this Track 3. so they wouldn't have track 2 on the left and it wouldn't go against their system. So now you have track 1 and track 3 of the Callahan subdivision. I hope that made at least a little sense. There's a bit of a traffic jam at Baldwin Interlocking because several trains are waiting to come through, and 2 of them have to come into Baldwin Yard to work. Included in the mix is an empty grain train off of the Florida Gulf and Atlantic Railway, which junctions with CSX here, and interchanges cars in Baldwin. The JE dispatcher decided the first guy to go in would be this L743, the Rock Runner, returning from Junction City, Georgia with loads for Winston, Florida. 743 will make drops for the FGAR and Waycross here and pick up cars for Winston and Wildwood. CSX 35 trails second on this train, the current lowest number YN2 locomotive still in service. I believe it is now slated for rebuild as of the making of this program.
1 minute. Last one. That'll be good. Get on down.
CSX equipment defect detector. Milepost 1.3. Track 1. No defects. No defects. Total axle 564. End of transmission.
L743 is also hauling this cut of empty jumbo-covered hoppers, I believe phosphate hoppers for the Bone Valley, which will stay on the train to Winston.
Clear for right in. Cut me according to clear. Bring it out. Okay.
Next, the M457 from earlier follows behind. And now we'll take a moment to appreciate this quality audio of some beautiful Gevo chug. Yes, this was in fact a train hopper on the M457. Finally, IO-45 would get his turn at the interlocking. IO-45 is nightly UPS, premium intermodal, and sometimes Tropicana empties, from Duval Yard in Jax to Uceda Yard in Tampa. The Tropicanas will be set out for tomorrow's L700 turn for the plant at Bradenton. The O-45 would end up being the last train I saw today, as I now had a terrible sunburn on the back of my neck and legs, and it was sweltering hot out. Additionally, the empty grain train sitting on the FGAR was not going to get into Baldwin or frankly go anywhere anytime soon, so there was no point in waiting for it. With that, thank you very much for watching this episode of Southern Rails, and I look forward to seeing you on the next one.